Dolls, in my opinion, are creepy as hell. I would hear old tales from my grandparents telling me how dolls were originally used to hold souls of past children, and that is why they were hollow. Now, this could just be an old tale to scare little kids, but to me it has stuck with me for my whole life. Since then, I've had a few creepy encounters with dolls. Maybe if this video gets enough comments about it, I'll share those in a future video. Today, these subscribers sent in their allegedly true experiences with haunted and creepy dolls. These gave me some serious chills while reading them, and I hope they do the same to you. If you have ever had a creepy encounter with something you just cannot explain, please send it on in at swampdweller.net. I'd love to share your story with everyone here in the swamp. Now, without further ado, let's get into these creepy stories with dolls. One of my hobbies is collecting and customizing ball-jointed dolls. It's kind of a snobby community, so I stick to myself. Though, my dolls creep out others, but I've never had any paranormal issues with them. I mostly bought them new, and nothing has been attached. That is only one of my doll-related hobbies. I also enjoy going to used stores and looking at knickknacks where I have found some pretty cool old little dolls. On one trip I went to Value Village and headed straight to the back where all of the little items were bagged because that's where the good deals are. Scanning the wall, one of the baggies caught my eye. There were 5 little dolls in it. There were these little crocheted ones with buttons for faces, 2 rubber Hansel and Gretel looking ones. Then this clown doll, which seemed out of place. I only wanted the 4 dolls. Not really a fan of clowns. It was only $3 for the 5 of them, and I figured I would give away the clown when I got home. When something is attached to something, I can physically feel it when I touch it. It's almost like there's this bubble around the item that my hand passes through. I got a flash of color and anxiety shoots up my arm, then my chest. It feels like a lump of anxiousness just sitting there. At that point, I knew there was something attached to one of them and decided to bring them home. One by one I picked up each doll. They all had a little something attached, but when I got to the clown, it was really strong. I took a picture of her and started asking if anyone wanted her. No one wanted to take her. Everyone told me to just donate her back. Weird things had already been happening around my house, so I figured there was no harm in waiting to get rid of the little doll. I'm not sure what is attached to the doll, but it's very angry and loud. It bangs on the wall, the doors, shelves, and I haven't slept properly in ages. I keep the lights on because it seems to help. It harassed me every night and eventually I got sick of it. One night, it crept up beside my bed, hitting it from underneath. I opened my eyes from a deep sleep, leaned towards it and yelled, "Screw off!" It must have been pretty startled because ever since then it hasn't been as bad. If it's dark it'll start banging around. Not as loud as it used to be though. It used to hide in my closet, but has since moved to the basement, in the corner of the laundry room and watches from behind the furnace. People have told me to get rid of it, but as long as it's behaving, I honestly don't mind it being here. I ignored it for a while, but maybe it's time to communicate and see what it wants. I'm a Native American from a reservation in Michigan. In my younger years, me and my close friend, I will call her M, decided to go back to our roots and get some snares. And in the northern Michigan winter, there is snow and cold. This was so long ago, however, I remember we wanted to utilize not only the meat for dinner, but the hide for regalia. We decided to go south into a swampy area that had cedar and pines. We were looking for pathways the rabbits used to set the snares when we noticed a clearing that seemed to have no snow. We both agreed to proceed towards what we saw, We both were getting creepy vibes as we approached the site, and when I entered the circle I saw jars with things in all around them. The freakiest thing was in the middle of this was a tree, which upon the vines grew toward the ground. Then, there in the fork of this tree was a doll, arms raised. The trees seemed to make a natural cove around this place, and I just wanted to get out of there. I had extreme butterflies and wanted to bolt. I and M didn't touch anything and proceeded home as fast as we could through the snow without shoes. After we reached my grandparents, we told my grandmother what had happened, and she called our cousin who was in the tribal police force. We told everything to him after he showed up, and he said he would take care of it. I tried to forget about it, and after he retired from the force, I decided to ask what had happened, and if he indeed saw what I and M saw. All he mentioned was he did indeed see what we had described, also that they emptied the jars and dismantled the site. I wanted to know what was in the jars, and I pushed all I could, but he would not say. I don't remember, or leave it be is all he would tell me. Call me A. M is a nurse in Virginia now, and my cousin, may he rest in peace now. Here where I live, I have experienced some weird things, but to me, this was the one that set a bit of fear into me when I was young. I wonder what that doll was for, and what all those jars were. When I was 10, my parents had bought me a Furby for my birthday. It only said the same 3 phrases, over and over again. 1. I'm hungry. 2. I'm tired. 3. I love you. After a couple of months of the Furby not being played with, it kept opening its eyes and moving places while I slept. One day, the batteries finally died, and all it did was make a brrr sound. After taking out the batteries, it continued to make noises, so I ran a bath and tossed the Furby in it to try to shut it up. Then I ran over to our microwave and threw the Furby in there to be cooked. As it was being melted, its eyes and mouth flew open as if it was in shock at what I had just did. So this next encounter is a little bit later in life. I was at my ex's house a few years ago. Her sister and her were talking over a few cigarettes. When I walk out, her nephew's Furby he had on the table opened its eyes and started talking about a dark island, and the Furbies lived there in fear of what hid in the dark trying to eat them. Freaked out, we looked at each other to see if I had any batteries. Upon opening it up, we noticed no batteries were even in it, as it continued to say it was in emotional pain and wanted to rescue its friends. I grabbed the Furby and smashed it on the ground. I went into her shed and grabbed a shovel to smash the Furby some more and bury it in the backyard. After that, I have never owned another Furby again. I don't know what was making it malfunction or if it was possessed or what, but honestly, it's one of the creepiest things that I've ever experienced. The story I'm about to relay happened about 15 years ago when I was 6, so some of the details might have slipped through the cracks. However, I doubt I'll ever forget it. Every other weekend, my dad would take me to my mom's house for dinner. She was a headstrong Italian that took a lot of pride in cooking for her family. It was so funny to me because she had a car she never drove, a computer she never used, and a wine cellar that's been untouched for as long as I can remember. She walked everywhere, even with her groceries in hand. Unfortunately, as a result, the rest of the house appeared to be frozen in time. It looked like it was stuck in the 70s, collecting dust in the areas she didn't feel that needed to be gone in. Some of the wallpaper was starting to peel, and the bedrooms of her kids were starting to smell musty. Don't get me wrong, my mom was a fantastic woman and was far more active than most women at her age, but the house was too big for her, so it was impossible for her to take care of each corner. My cousins and I used to explore the little nooks and crannies that she had forgotten about. During one of our little excursions into the cellar, my cousin Georgia pulled out a Ouija board from a pile of old magazines and newspapers. I didn't have the foggiest clue what it was, so when my cousins Georgia, Annie, and Jonathan all told me I would be able to speak to ghosts with it, I was floored. It sounded scary, but it also sounded too cool to pass up. Georgia decided to perform the seance in the creepiest room of the house, the doll room. The doll room, as we called it, had to have been the most out-of-place room in the house. When my mom bought the house, it came with a wardrobe, a dimly lit painting of a man, and a built-in shelf for dolls of various sizes. No matter how many times we wandered into that room, we could never understand why she had such a room. We turned the bedside lamp, set the board on the ground, and used a small glass cup in place of a planchette. Unsurprisingly, it was lost somewhere in the clutter. My cousins goofed around a little, pulling it around just to scare me. I remember growing a little frustrated and feeling stupid for believing that ghosts were even real. They laughed until we all heard the familiar sound of something rolling against wood. All three of them fell silent. Slowly we looked down at the cup. I could recall it once sat leisurely between the two letters, and now it sat firmly on the A. We exchanged baffled expressions for what felt like an eternity. I placed my hand on the glass, waiting for something to happen. Just when I was beginning to think it was somebody's foot knocking the glass around, I felt it jerking slightly to the right. I decided to push it in that general direction, thinking that something was trying to egg me on. My cousin started to snicker, thinking I was just pulling their legs. To this day, I argue with myself on whether it was just the power of suggestion or something was really trying to contact me from the other side. I took my hand off the glass when we reached the letter L. Owl. We waited until we were content there wasn't going to be anything else following those two letters. Out of morbid curiosity, we asked Owl how he died. My cousins placed their fingers back on the cup. Because they did, I'm not sure if they were just messing with me or if it was real. The word followed was fire. I remember Georgia nervously laughing and saying, "Okay, owl that died in the fire, do you want to talk to us?" The lamp flickered almost a greenish glow for a split second, lighting the room as a lightning bolt would have. We were frozen in our spots. This could have just been a fluke. The house was ancient, and it wasn't like Mom was a master technician. Maybe the bulb was dying. Suddenly, Jonathan yelped, smacking his arm as if swatting at a mosquito. He insisted something shocked him. At that point, we decided to call quits. We put the Ouija board back where we found it. Since there was news articles littered throughout the cellar, my cousins thought it would be a good idea to play detective to see if anything was there about a fire. After a few minutes, we grew bored of searching and ran back upstairs to tell the adults what we had found. Some of the adults glanced at each other with mock surprise and patronizing glances. My dad and uncle, however, seemed genuinely curious. On the road home, my dad told me an interesting tale. Without a hint of his typical humor or goofiness, he told me about when he was about 12 years old, living in Mom's house with his brother and sisters. He recalled it was a hot summer night, so everyone, save for his sisters, had their doors open to help maintain air circulation. His sisters always kept their bedroom door shut because it was fairly noisy, and sometimes would slam it shut if a sudden draft would reach in. He laid on top of his blankets, watching the ceiling fan go around when his peripherals caught something move in his doorway. When he looked, he noticed a silhouette of someone peering around at his height, glancing at his room before making it down the hallway. At first, he thought it was his brother, since the silhouette was coming from the opposite direction of the bathroom. My dad thought he could bust his big brother for being out of bed. He slinked into the hallway and saw the figure dart around the corner towards his sister's shared bedroom. From there, his brother wouldn't be able to hide. He turned the corner only to be met with his sister's bedroom door. That was the first time he claimed that all the hairs on the back of his neck stood up, and he suddenly felt very vulnerable. He turned around towards his brother's room and saw him sleeping right on top of his blankets. My dad didn't get any sleep that night. Up until that point, he never believed in ghosts. I'd be skeptical of his story if it wasn't for the fact that I could still hear the shock in his voice. My dad told me that the Ouija board could have been my cousins trying to scare me, but he also said he wouldn't doubt for a second if something was really trying to contact us. Let me start by giving a little background on myself and where I grew up. My name is Chris and I live in a small town in north-central North Carolina. This first story takes place on the farm where I grew up, and I was around 14 at the time. The land we owned was about 30 acres of mostly trees. In what is pretty much the center of the property stands this old tree. The tree is not and has never been dead, but it would never grow any leaves and always looked dead. This particular day, I had come home from school, and as usual, my dad had not gotten home from work yet, as he often didn't until around 7, sometimes even later. So, I had to entertain myself by finishing chores and eventually taking my dad's rifle, which is a simple .22 semi-auto, and walked the property. I hadn't the intention to actually hunt anything. The rifle was only for protection, even though a .22 isn't much, it did make me feel safer. Anyway, I walked all the way down to the end of the property and goofed around a little before I noticed the sun was going down. Knowing I needed to head back before the darkness set in, not because I could get lost because the path was very well beaten, so much you could probably drive a very large truck on it. But I wanted to get back because I wanted to be in the house before my dad got back. So on my way back I took a hastened pace. I began to hear footsteps in the trees to my left. I paid it little mind mostly because it was midsummer and the woods are full of critters, so I assumed it was a squirrel or something of the like. So I kept going. Keep in mind, my house is near the very front of the property, so it takes a long time to walk from the very back. As I kept going, I could hear the footsteps continue, but I noticed they were very loud and sounded very heavy. Now, these woods are very dense, but the trees are thin and spread out for about 50 or 60 yards, deep from the path, so you can see fairly well into the trees. I couldn't see anything that could have been making that much noise. Given how big the sound, you would think it would have been easy to spot, but there was nothing. I continued to walk, and of course as I continued, I did see the steps in the trees. At this point, I had enough and decided to stop and face the trees in the direction of the steps, not realizing where I was, which was almost perfectly in line with the aforementioned tree. I fired a few rounds into the woods and waited. I didn't hear anything, so I decided just to move more quickly to home. But, as I turned and took a step towards home, the moment my foot touched the ground, I heard the voice of a woman whisper in my ear. Now, what truly terrified me is that I felt the heat of the breath in my ear. As soon as I did, my eyes did what I can only describe as the vertigo effect. It's a bit anticlimactic, but that terrified me for a very, very long time. My second story takes place on the same property but inside the house this time. A little backstory on the house: it was at least 100 years old. My dad told me that when we first moved there in the 90s, the house had no foundation or running water. Now, this day, I was around 12 years old, and I was on the second floor of the house looking through one of those closets out of boredom, and I stepped on one of my sister's old baby alive dolls, and it started crying, which made me jump up because I didn't see it and it was the last thing I was expecting. So, I picked it up and was going to take the batteries out so it would stop. When I turned the doll around and opened the Velcro that hid the batteries, I noticed that there were not only no batteries, but the entire housing for the battery pack was gone. And the moment I noticed this, it started crying even louder and began to wiggle. I freaked out and threw the doll back into the closet and ran down the stairs. As soon as I got to the stairs, I leaped from the top stair to the first floor in one bound and straight out the front door, where I stayed outside till my dad got home. This story takes place in South Carolina, at Fort Jackson. When I went to basic training, it was as I expected it to be. Drill sergeants yelling and smoking you on a daily basis. However, there was one drill sergeant who seemed to be a bit off compared to the rest of them. One day, we were washing our gear outside after coming back from a 12-mile ruck march. The drill comes outside carrying what seemed to be a baby, except that it wasn't. It was a doll, pale and in a black suit. She kept rocking it in her arms and giving us death stares. She would even talk to it. Fast forward to a week later, we were getting smoked for someone dropping their ride. I mean, running around our barracks in endless circles. When we were done, we formed up, and well, let's just say that we have a mannequin, and which we use as punishment to carry around. It weighs around 180 pounds and is definitely a burden. So when my battle buddy and I were at our barracks, we looked up, and we see the mannequin looking out the window, staring at us and moving its shoulders, which is just impossible. Keep in mind that we didn't even leave it near the window or anything. To make things worse, there was no one inside. Everyone was outside. Now that I think about it, there might be a connection between the drill sergeant's doll and that mannequin. I don't know. It was definitely creepy, and I've never experienced anything remotely similar to it since. So this is a story that took place when I was around 8 years old in my old neighborhood. I was next door neighbors with my best friend Alex. We both went to the same school and always hung out every day after school. One day I was bringing my Nintendo 64 to his house so we could play together. Once I got into the house, his uncle was there watching the TV so we couldn't use it. Today, I now know that he wasn't his uncle because my older sibling, which knew Alex's older sibling, told me that his parents rented out rooms to random people from their original hometown. So, the quote-unquote uncle was just a random stranger from out of the country. He told us to go into his shed to search for an extra TV, so we opened the shed and started searching. We found an older TV, but we could use it. Then, something started moving all the things around, and we thought it was a rat so we didn't mind at first. Then we heard laughter. Something so scary that I tried to leave, but Alex told me not to worry. We kept searching around for the laughter, and we eventually found this one male doll that was around 2 feet long. It was all torn and battered, so we figured it was just broken. We just sat it down and decided to go hook up the TV in his room. We played for a while until his uncle left the house for food, and his parents were at work, so we were home alone. We started hearing noises at the house, but figured it was nothing. But then, we heard that same distinct laughter. The doll was moving around the house carefully, which we saw through the small peek underneath the closed door. The doll was looking for something, which was probably us if I had to guess. We were both freaking out, but we knew we had to get away from the house. We opened the window and jumped out and ran towards my house. The doll managed to somehow look at us as we were running away, through the window, and just laugh. We stayed at my house all afternoon until his parents came home. Ever since that day, I have always experienced weird things in my friend's house, like having YouTube videos end abruptly and start playing other random things like clown videos, which I think it is a cereal commercial from the 70s. I ignored all these weird signs for the rest of my childhood, and recently we have met up for the first time in a long time. I don't think we've met up since departing and going to different high schools. Somehow, the topic of weird things was brought up and I asked if he remembered all those things. He did remember. As an 8-year-old child, I was given an old porcelain doll by a very dear family friend, Miss Marion. She was always coming across things and giving them to me. This doll was the last thing she ever did give to me though. I was never really into dolls at all growing up. but I took the doll and placed her in my room in a small child-sized rocking chair. The doll sat next to my closet and dresser, right beside my nightlight. The doll was very pretty. She was dressed in peach and cream-colored dress, with an apron and petticoats. She had little black Mary Jane shoes that when removed showed her delicately painted toenails. Her body was soft. Only her head, forearms, hands, and legs from the knee down were porcelain. Her limbs were pink. Her dark brown hair hung in slightly frizzed and now loose curls. Her eyes were brown. Her cheeks were a rosy peach color, all like mine. Miss Marion made a point of saying the doll reminded her of me, which is why she gave her to me. From the moment that doll, I named her Claire, came into my house, things began to happen. I was always uneasy with Claire. I never wanted to touch her. When I played in my room, it was as if she watched me. It wasn't anything to panic about, but I do remember feeling like if I did something wrong, she might actually tell on me. How ridiculous does that sound? The first real occurrence I remember was when I was reading in my room, ghost stories if you can believe that, when a musical carousel horse that sat on my dresser began to play. Not just a couple of notes, like an old mechanical music box will do at times, but like someone just wound it up fully and let it go. I sat stunned and stared at the little horse, and it moved up and down in time with the music. Then, it just stopped. Not wound down or anything, but just suddenly stopped. I was a pretty brave kid. I didn't run and I didn't tell my mom. I used to see a shadow man in the hallway or in my parents' bedroom door all my growing up years. And if she didn't believe me about that, she definitely wouldn't believe me about any mundane thing such as a music box playing on its own. So I just let it go. The next thing that happened was the voice. For several nights and into these years, I was awoken by what sounded like a woman inches from my face shouting my name. I jump and sit up and find my room empty. Those happenings died down after a few months though. She then started to plague my little brother with the same thing, and now that he and I are grown up and gone, she's moved on to my dad. The little thing started to get to me. I'd put something in a certain place only to find it later on the floor or on my dresser, right next to Claire. All my missing items eventually turned up around her. Once a ring ended up in the pocket of her apron. Books would fall off my shelves and a perfume smell would sometimes fill my room. The doll itself didn't smell at all, but the air around her would. My catalyst to finally get Claire out of my room was the night that I woke up after hearing thumping around my closet. I opened my eyes, sat up in bed, and of course my eyes were drawn to the nightlight where Claire sat. As I watched, the source of thumping became clear. The rocking chair Claire occupied was rocking on its own. I had thick shag carpet, so there is no way it was rocking just by chance. If that wasn't enough, Claire's feet, which were both turned to the side facing opposite each other, slowly straightened themselves to both be pointing directly up. This part still freaks me out 20 years later. She then turned her head, which was quite impossible to do since it was attached fixed to her clothed body. She looked towards me, and every music box in the room, all 4 of them, started to play at once. I was frozen with fear. I didn't feel endangered so much as I felt scared of what was happening. A scream from my mom and dad. The music stopped, but Claire maintained her gaze in my direction. And this is why I hate dolls. Even after that, I couldn't get rid of Claire totally. I ended up stuffing her in a box in the back of a storage closet. She's still there as far as I know. So is the woman who now screams my dad's name in the middle of the night, and not in a kinky way, while I think she explained some of the oddities that happened in my parents' house, I don't think she is the tie to it all, especially with the Shadow Man. My friend Tim Weisberg is a paranormal radio podcast host of the show Spooky South Coast, and also an author. He asked me to lend him Claire once. He heard my story back in 2011. I obliged, and Claire went to stay with him for a few months. He wrote about his experiences with Claire while she stayed with him in the book Haunted Objects that I mentioned earlier. Temperature changes in the room she stayed in, along with hearing voices, were two of his note encounters. Claire also stayed briefly at the Lizzie Borden Bed and Breakfast in 2012. The guys from the Haunted Towns show encountered some things in my parents' house while Claire was with them. She now lives at my friend's old haunted house. He is a Haungan, so he and his love, along with house's other spirits, tend to keep her in line. My daughter has several old porcelain dolls. When she was 9, she got a sudden interest in them. I had never bought them for her because they are very often very delicate and I didn't want her to break them. I took her to the Goodwill and she begged for one. I let her buy it since she takes care of her things good, so why not? I quickly noticed something was different in my house. I felt like I was being watched from every corner. Shortly after that, she asked for another doll at the Goodwill. Over the years, she has collected 3. I noticed she was very careful about which one she picked. She treats the dolls like gold and keeps them sitting up on the corner of her bed. She tells me the dolls like me since I'm so careful with them when I move them or make her bed. I see shadows around my house and I hear soft voices. Nothing makes me feel in danger and I'm getting used to it, but it's just freaky. None of this stuff really started until after these dolls came in the house though, and that's why I do think that they do have spirits inside of them or something like that. Any thoughts would be very much appreciated. I know this is really weird, but I've always been obsessed with the idea of having a haunted item. So I went on eBay and did a very thorough search on trusted sellers and stores where I could buy haunted items. I eventually settled on my doll Evelyn, because the seller stated that the vessel was inhabited by the spirit, Evelyn, who died at 17 and had hopes of going to college and being a teacher. I felt a connection to her, because I am currently a senior at university and about to start working as an English teacher. I hope to read to Evelyn often and ask her advice for my lesson plans. I even am interested about giving her a place in the classroom to sit so she can still achieve her dreams. So after the first day and night with Evelyn, I only have a couple out of ordinary things to report. First, my cat won't stop rubbing against the doll or sniffing it. And second, I fell asleep last night with my TV on watching South Park on Hulu, which means my DVD player was on too. I woke up at about 1 a.m. to both of those things being shut off. Now I know there's probably a logical explanation for that, but I'm just hoping it's her. On my second day and night, nothing happened last night that I know of, but I woke up at 2 a.m. for no reason, but that's becoming typical for me anyway. But today, as I was getting ready for class, I turned on a paranormal story time on YouTube, and right after, my door that had been shut opened by itself about a quarter of the way. My cat and I both shot our heads up to the door when it happened. When I know, I will probably sound dumb for this, but I used the Ghost Radar app and it said there was an entity right in the direction where my door is. Now, this doesn't prove Evelyn is a haunted doll, but I do think there's something off about her. One night I was working the night shift. It was my first time, so I came in late by accident. I did get scolded, but they needed help very seriously due to the fact that one of our patients had blood all over their face. We did not know exactly why. We thought maybe someone had been in their room and wasn't watching them. But it wasn't until later the janitor said that he saw her scratching her own face. So during that time, I started helping to get all the cleaning supplies and medical gear that we would need to treat her wounds. But then, she grew silent. She did not say anything for the next hour, when all of a sudden she kept saying, "Madsen, Madsen," repeatedly, while scratching her face again. I was terrified because that's my last name. I wasn't wearing my tag because I came in late, so I didn't have my proper uniform. I didn't know what to do, but she just kept saying, Madsen. Madsen. I couldn't tell she was even looking at me because her blood was all over her face and her hair was sticking to it, so I just couldn't tell. Looking at me or not, I called the doctor to come and help me. He helped her and I stood in the hallway during that time because I was terrified. Later I thought to myself maybe she was just saying Mad's son, as in her own child, but then again, I am well known, so maybe she's somehow heard my name. But either way, I couldn't recognize her. I tried to ask what happened to her the next day, but they said patient confidentiality. They would only say she had been moved elsewhere. I never figured out if she was saying my name or was talking about something else entirely. I've been a nurse now for 7 years, and I absolutely love it. Back when I was in school, besides your clinicals where you did a rotation in every unit, examples like labor, delivery, psych, etc., you had a month-long unpaid internship if you passed your exams and were stated for graduation. The internships were given out by the head instructor and it went alphabetically. My last name ends in a T, so I was at the tail end. All the internships I wanted, emergency, medical surgery, etc., they had all been taken. The instructor told me, hey, we have a psych internship at a major psychiatric facility. You're a big strapping guy and I'm sure you'll fit perfect. Great. Psych. I wasn't thrilled. I had no interest in psych, but I needed the hours to graduate and I figured I'd have stories to tell my buddies over a beer. I had no idea the hospital I intern at is quite well known, so I'm not going to go into any specifics, but it was a psych ward that deals with many different psychiatric disorders. There are a few floors. They had a rehab as well as a clinic for eating disorders. The floor I was assigned to, the children's psychiatric ward, so the children 18 and below with all kinds of issues were there. Since I was not licensed yet, I didn't distribute medication or really do anything besides work as a glorified orderly. Some of the kids were awesome. They had severe autism or other issues, but they were still great kids. Then there was Adam. He was diagnosed with RAD, as well as a bevy of psychological issues. He was 10 and had tried to kill his 6-year-old sister, punched his mom so hard he knocked her unconscious, and killed the family's cat, among other things. He was not allowed general access, not allowed to do craft hour. He was not allowed to have access to scissors and such. He was allowed an hour of free time where I and another staff member brought him to a small atrium where he'd run in circles or kick a half-deflated soccer ball. Well, one day, it was raining and the atrium is a no-go, so I was told I could let him in the small nurse's lounge. The charge nurse swore she removed any weapons he could have used. So I brought him in there, and while he sat in the corner and talked to himself, I sat in the chair and waited. I get radioed from an orderly, so I take my eyes off Adam for a millisecond, and the next thing I know, a chair is violently launched at me. It hits me square in the face and I go down. I was stunned, not knocked out, and suddenly, there's a 10-year-old, 80-pound kid on the top of me, hell-bent on killing me. Luckily, he was easily distracted, and at that exact moment, the charge nurse came into the lounge, probably to get coffee. I was able to flip him over and get him subdued. The charge nurse almost wets herself when she starts apologizing. I ended up with a broken nose and bruises. The head nurse was slapped on the wrist and I was given special treatment for the next 2 weeks. Surprisingly, besides Adam and a few others, that place made such an impact on me after I graduated, I became certified. I ended up working there for 4 years. So, I have many stories from there. Last I heard, Adam was in a long-term facility and with meds, and he is hopefully doing okay. So this happened about a year ago. Some background: I'm a student veterinary nurse, a 21-year-old female. In my placement, I am required to do on-call, so I stay above the vets in a small flat. My first night on call, and I happen to be the only person staying in that flat, and we have 4 or so inpatients, cats and dogs. When someone rings the vets at night, it transfers to our out-of-hours service, which will then transfer any emergencies to our on-vet call. So, it's about midnight and I'm just falling asleep when I hear a loud male shouting outside the window. It sounded like, "I'm going to break in," or something like that. The practice is not a rough area, but it is a little busy, so I immediately sat up knowing something was wrong. I start to hear banging on the front glass doors and I panic. Sometimes when there are emergencies, people won't ring and just drive down and hope someone will be there. I consider going down, but it sounds as if they're trying to break the windows on the doors. Then, I hear nothing for a couple of minutes and then a smash in the window below my room. The window happens to be the pharmacy. We keep drugs in there, but not dangerous drugs as they are locked away. At this point, I'm pretty terrified. I call the owner of the vets and the police. The owner says she is on her way, and as the 008 service called her to say someone rang and was threatening to break in. So, I have no idea if this guy is in the practice or what. I instantly run downstairs in my PJ to the kennels on the other side of the building as I can hear the dogs barking, and I know most of them are getting worked up with the noise. After I'm sure they are okay, I scout the rest of the practice out apart from the pharmacy room and run back upstairs. I can see out my window onto the street below and just can make out the guy's figure. He is carrying a torch and has his hood up. He runs off, and I'm not sure if he has seen me at the window or anything else. But soon, after the police and the owners arrive, I feel a little bit better. They look around and the window broken is a small window. The hole smashed isn't big enough for anyone to fit through, so the police and owners decide it's fine to leave and go back home. I'm pretty bloody shaken up at this point and am reassured he probably was just some drunk and won't come back. I don't sleep and about 4 in the morning I hear someone walking on the glass below my window and the sound of someone cracking the glass off the window. I get up and check out the window and he's back. Now I'm annoyed because I'm so tired after working in the day and can't even sleep thanks to this guy. I stand at the window with my light on, making it obvious that I'm there, and he carries on. So I ring the owner and police again. This time they come and catch him and he pretends he is just out for a walk at night. I shout out the window that he rang the 008 service, and they ring the number he used to ring, and to no one's surprise, it belongs to his phone. I had to do a police statement in my PJs in the staff room by the time we were finished, and it was 6 in the morning. I could have gone to sleep, but I just drove home because there was no way I was staying on my own again. 2 days later, I was put back on call and was in the flat on my own again with the window boarded up. Apparently the guy had been going around the town and following girls home and breaking into cars so they weren't surprised. He wanted to save the animals and stop the noise. The only noise was our drip monitors and it's not audible from the outside. The dogs only started barking when he tried to break in. Obviously this creep was after some ketamine, and luckily the police took him in and they replaced our window. About 10 years ago, my grandfather was suffering from liver cancer and fading quickly. He was a wonderful man with a deep-bellied laugh and a contagious spirit. Even in his last days with no appetite, he ate up every bite of home-cooked meal I had brought him, just to make me smile. Constantly by his side was a stern but warm hospice nurse, whom I'll call HN. She had moved here from Haiti, and had been with my grandfather for about 2 weeks. She shared a few Haitian superstitions about death with us as a source of comfort. When someone dies, something drops. Your loved ones may be reluctant to let go when you are watching them. Everyone has a death time. In a gentle way, she informed us one day in October that his time to pass had come, and that it would be around 8 p.m. It was a hard pill to swallow, not to mention one that we didn't necessarily believe. We went about our day, spending some time with him on the couch, and eventually, my mother and uncle ordered us dinner for delivery. At 8:02 p.m., the doorbell rang. My uncle went to grab money for the delivery driver. My mother and I went into the kitchen to get plates and silverware. At that moment, my grandfather was finally left alone. He took his last breath. Simultaneously, despite being on opposite ends of the kitchen, the refrigerator door flung open and nearly every piece of food dropped into the floor. We were devastated by the loss but found some solace knowing that this was his time. HN packed her things and left, like the Mary Poppins of death, forever shrouding my family with an eerie feeling of mystery and comfort. I'm currently a supervisor at a skilled nursing facility. We regularly have call lights going off, and not just an electrical problem, in rooms that are empty or have recently had someone pass. Most of the time they are bathroom emergency call lights that are triggered, which when pulled activate a pull down switch on the wall that has to be manually forced back up. The worst one was an emergency call light that was going off in a bathroom on the 3rd floor. In a bathroom that is always locked and used primarily for storage. I'm the super, and I have all the keys, and the only key to that bathroom on my shift, which is of course, night shift. I took an aide with me to go unlock the room and climb over the stored wheelchairs and mattresses and such to deactivate the light. Super creepy. One night, one of our phones kept ringing, and I was sitting in my office near the nurse's station. I kept hearing the phone ring, get picked up by a nurse, and then quickly hung up. I thought we were being prank called, so I picked it up the next time it rang and heard static. My phone read maint on the line screen, meaning that it was a call coming from maintenance, which again is locked and I have the only key. I was so convinced we'd experienced something when we went into the maintenance department that I video recorded our entry. We didn't see anything creepy, but we felt it. I unplugged their phone and left them a work order to fix it. Another time recently, we had a rehab patient call us into the room. She was in a tizzy over the kids in her room and wanted to know what kind of place this was. She had dementia, so we didn't think anything of it. Then the person in the room across the hall called for us in a wad because there were some kids harassing the lady across the hall. She told us she heard them yell and run away. We all thought it was creepy, and then 2 other people further up the hall called about the same thing. This made me a little freaked out. I went so far as to go around the building and the outside of the building to see if I could find any tracks or any signs of kids. Maybe we were being pranked and something like that. But with snow on the ground, it would be easy to see fresh tracks, and there was never any. They all agreed that no one was coming from outside. The kids were entering the rooms from the hallway and then leaving back into the hallway. This was all about at 4 a.m., and the only entry to that hall would be from my office and the nurse's station. The only other doors are fire exits wired with alarms. This may not be the creepiest stuff, but a dimly lit place like this makes your imagination run wild in the middle of the night. Myself, my in-laws, and husband all work at the hospital. Personally, the only experiences I've had are really just off-putting emotions. As a nurse, many of us understand not only the smell of death, but the feeling of it. I've had a few experiences, as I've only been in the field a couple years, of walking into a patient's room and feeling death coming. I knew the night my closest patient was going to die by the feeling in the room. I still think about him daily. However, one experience that shook me happened on a day I wasn't on shift, but of course, we all heard about it. In a gist, a patient died and the family came to tell us. We give them space and privacy during those times, and are often not in the room. They informed us that after the priest said his prayer, their father passed peacefully. The only problem was, there was no priest. We did not call one, and our only volunteer priest was not in that day. No one saw him come or go, and we have checked the security footage even. My mother-in-law has worked on the unit I am on for over 20 years and has had similar experiences. Let me tell you, although not very paranormal, sundowning and full moons have very real effects. We actually circle full moon days on our calendar to alert staff that it's going to be a crazy shift. It's my husband, however, who works in the basement, who has the most stories actually. From lights and radios going on and off to footsteps when no one's around, all the typical but still very unsettling paranormal experiences. Since my husband started as a porter, he's now a supply coordinator, He knows every hall of our hospital, whereas I do not. I rarely leave my unit. One day we were taking a shortcut out of the hospital together, down a hall I'd never been in before, when I mentioned how cold and off I felt. I told him the hall was making me feel sad. He then told me this is the only hall to and from the morgue. As we were discussing this, we walked right past it. I'm a strong believer in energies, which is why I think that's why I felt so unsettled in a hall that seen so much death. Anyway, not the scariest stuff, but there's definitely a lot that goes bump in the night, if you know what I mean, at a hospital. I have been a nurse for almost 6 years, and including the 3 years of training, I have 9 years of different, creepy stories throughout this time. Let's face it, if there was going to be some kind of ghostly encounter, a hospital is a pretty likely place for it to occur with all of the deaths that inevitably take place. This particular incident takes place in a hospital in the southeast of England, where I completed my nurse training. I was in my 3rd and final year at this point. The hospital had decided that the ward I was on was due to be refurbished, so our ward, patients and staff included, moved to an overflow ward so that the builders could get their jobs done, without any restrictions. As any student nurse will tell you, we get asked to do all sorts of things to help out, and some of them have nothing to do with what we are studying. However, it is all experience. I was rostered to be on placement the day of the move, which was a logistical nightmare as we all had to move all current inpatients, equipment, and staff in a safe way. I was asked to help with the move, which was fine by me. We managed to get the patients and the bulk of essential equipment moved within a few hours. As the last patient was being wheeled off the ward, a sister asked me to turn the patient call bell system from the mains, and we left. Once we had put away the bulk of the stuff and we had moved down and gotten all the patients settled, I was asked to go back up to the empty ward to fill up a few metal cages, on wheels, with some of the non-essentials that had been left behind. It was boring things like spare extension cords, paper, and stationery supplies. Each ward is cross-charged for these items and has a set budget, and any information on the display boards. As I walked into the empty ward, I had this sense of anxiety fill me. I was creeped out. There wasn't a single person on this ward except me. The ward's sister was coming up to meet me in the hour to help move the cages, and boy did I feel totally alone up there. After about half an hour, I had pretty much finished and was just putting the last few bits and pieces into the cages that were by the nurse's station, when a patient call bell went off. I almost crapped myself. I'm sure you guys know how they work, but just in case, each patient bed space, side room, toilet, shower, etc. has a call bell or a buzzer. Once it activated, it lets the staff know the patient wants us for something, and there is also an emergency buzzer that gets pulled usually by staff when there is. Yep, you guessed it, it was an emergency. This was just a normal patient call bell that was going off, but as I had been the only person there and I was the person who turned off the system, I was freaking out. Instinct took over and I had to go see if I actually was needed. Not so shockingly, there wasn't anyone there. I reset the buzzer and waited outside the ward for the sister to come up and meet me. Thankfully, I didn't wait long at all. I told her what had happened, and having a good working relationship, she took me seriously and told me if I didn't want to go back into the ward, I didn't have to. But of course, I did. I didn't want to let them down. We had to walk to the end of the ward to get 2 mobile computers. As we walked, I could have sworn I heard footsteps behind us, but I didn't want to sound crazy and mention it. The sister then turned to look at me and mouthed, "Can you hear that?" And when I nodded, we sped up and got to the computers and got out of there pretty quick. When we went to move the metal cages, we heard what sounded like a wooden walking stick being hit against an old-fashioned radiator in one of the side rooms. I had lost all my nerve at this point, and the sister was brave enough to go and have a look, but the room was empty, and the noise stopped when she walked in. We spoke about it afterward, and neither of us felt threatened in any way, or like we were in any danger. It seemed more like they were having fun knowing that their noises were no longer being drowned out by a bustling ward, or being mistaken for a patient. Just over a year ago, my father had a heart attack. The cardiac part of the hospital goes in one way and out another, so it's pretty hard to find the right door when you're new to visiting that ward. The first time he was admitted, my mother and I found it easy to get there. There is normally a lot of staff around to help. However, the second or third time he had gone onto the ward, they got taken straight in there because of chest pains and they had to go to the emergency department. It was at least a busy time in the hospital, as we were dropping off his medication rather than visiting. Before I really start, I just want to give a clear picture of the hospital. It has 3 entrances, 2 at the front and 1 in the back, with various car parks based around these doors. The hospital is made up of an old and new building which are connected by a bridge. The cardiac ward is in the old part of the hospital. However, this door has limited parking. We go into the back door rather than the one which goes straight up to the cardiac ward, as the parking around there is full, taking us into a new building. This means that not only do we need to make our way to the top of the hospital, but also to the other side. So we aren't sure where we're going and ask a nurse, who gives us a muddled version of the directions to the cardiac ward. We follow them for a while and end up completely lost. So we ask another nurse who gives us more directions and we're lost again. We're both the stereotypical idiot females when it comes to following directions. So we try following signs, but we aren't sure where we are and neither of us are familiar with this part of the hospital. Eventually, we end up in an elevator that looks like a service one, as it was sliding the mesh doors rather than solid metal ones. The buttons claim they can get us back to where we were from, so we try it. This puts us at the other end of the corridor that we have been on before, so we take another elevator to put us down on the right floor, which ended up not being the right floor after all. We now have the option of going to floor 0, which my mom informs me is the morgue, as you need a key to get down there, or floor 3, unless you want to go higher. We press to take floor 3 and end up in this empty white hallway with a disused end of a life cancer ward. I'm instantly creeped out. We are in a white hallway with an old ward, beds and equipment are abandoned, an old flight of stairs going up to somewhere you can't see, and is not signposted. A set of double doors at the end of the hall and an older couple in their 50s wearing reasonably modern clothes. There was a man looking into the ward with his hand on the woman's shoulder. She just stood there, facing the wall. My mother looks around and suggests we find someone to ask where we go from here, and does not notice this creepy couple standing right in front of us until I point them out. They do not acknowledge us in the same way she acknowledged them. She then goes and walks down the corridor as I'm contemplating what the hell I should do, because I don't want to stay on my own, but I don't want to go through the doors. Then, this nurse in a uniform that clearly is not the same as the other ones, opens a door just wide enough to get through. She walks into the corridor, looks right at us and says, "You should not be down here with us." I tell my mom to get back in the elevator, but she tries to ask the nurse where we need to go. The nurse replies, "The highest button." So we get in and press the one she said. Whilst this is taking us to God's who knows where, I have a bad feeling about what just happened, so I try to make sense of it by asking if the nurse's uniform means she works in a specific area or was a higher ranking or something. My mom used to work at the hospital cleaning, so she has seen most of the uniforms worn. She replies no, and that nurse maybe came from another hospital for a training program or to help out. The elevator opens and we get out and walk down another empty corridor. This time we bump into a nurse wearing the usual uniform, walking back towards a different elevator. She stops us from going any further and tells us we are on the floor with operating rooms and we can't stay up here. We tell her that we are lost and get into the elevator with her, which puts us in a completely different part of the hospital where we need to be. Problem solved, apart from that I'm convinced we had an encounter with something paranormal. A few months ago my dad was in the hospital again, and during visiting hours one of his nurses came to talk to us. We had just been talking about what my parents described as a weird experience, and my dad asked the nurse if she knows where we could have been. She thinks that we are playing a joke on her and tells us that this is all the floors that there are, and the floor that we were talking about she has never heard of. She realizes that we are serious though, and she says that maybe we bumped into the hospital ghost, an old nurse who has apparently been seen on the children's ward when a child is dying. After she leaves, the child makes a full recovery. I have heard of this story before, but a kind spirit who helps others, and I can 100% say that whatever we saw was not kind and did not want us around. Of course, I can't be sure that it was really paranormal and not just a lover of the paranormal being biased, but it didn't feel right. They were in old-fashioned clothes. They were see-through. And they were very violent towards us. But I had this feeling of complete dread when we stepped out of the elevator. That coupled with the fact that my mom didn't even see the couple. At least not until I pointed them out. The fact that the nurse said the area does not exist, and the fact that neither of us can remember the facial features of anyone we saw on that floor, just the clothing and the hair color, tell me that what we saw was not normal or good. I now have an absolute fear of going anywhere on my own in the hospital, just in case I see anything else that I'd rather not. I still get the creeps when thinking about it. I am an RN working in a group home. I split my time working at various homes and spend a day or so a week at this one particular home. I never noticed anything strange working there before. I have a patient who has various psychiatric disorders, MR, schizoactive, etc. Anyway, she seems to sometimes switch over to different personas. I heard her be a man once. She usually blames bad behavior on that guy. So since I'd say I work at the psych population, this isn't a strange one to me. Anyway, I had a conversation with staff yesterday about it and how it could be kind of creepy, especially since I'm open-minded to this kind of stuff. The staff member spoke to me about the house used to emit off bad vibes. Not at least since I've been there though. Staff didn't like going in there alone, and the house is empty during the day. One day a staff member heard breathing similar to The Exorcist and a male grunting sounds from the third floor, while one of our higher functioning patients was home for the day. When the staff member said she gathered enough courage to see what was going on, she saw our patient and asked her how she was. The patient said, "I'm fine," in a happy girly voice. Staff member said that she was afraid of the patient ever since. Maybe it's not all that paranormal, but I call this super creepy considering the patient that was home that day was a guy, and he shouldn't have a girly voice. I spent my New Year's Eve and Christmas in hospital, so yay go me. I'm 14 years old and I was in a pretty bad accident. My dad was T-boned by a drunk driver and a piece of metal almost completely impaled my leg. I really did escape death. This happened not even 3 hours ago and I just can't get back to sleep. Thank God I'm leaving today. There has been this nurse. She looks like a really normal and nice person. The things she has said all over the past couple of days, though, have just given me the creeps. My leg will sometimes start to leak blood and she just needs to redress it. She would gently rub my leg randomly. She was not putting cream or any type of medical rub on it. She would just rub it. Nowhere near the wound either, like always on the other side. I would ask her what she was doing and she would answer, changed from testing the pain to massage to feeling for lumps, all while doing the same exact thing every time. She did it uncomfortably slow, too, and always for a long time. She would make these comments about how I had little to no chest hair and how it would come in once I'm a man. She would make these comments like ladies love men with scars. I woke up 3 hours ago and this nurse was just standing at the foot of my bed staring at me. I didn't move. I do not think she knew I was awake. I had my eyes half open, peeping out looking at her. She was literally just standing there looking at me. I turned over to suggest I was awake and no joke I saw her leave the room and walk into the hallway. What do you suggest I do? Do I tell the doctor or some of the other nurses or do I just keep this to myself?